I don't think I was expecting to recognize how heavy some of the decision making can feel at times.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Visionary Voices in Optometry, a series from the Ontario Association of Optometrists focused on the people and the perspectives shaping eye care in Ontario today. In recognition of International Women's Day, we're highlighting women in optometry as clinicians, leaders, advocates, and decision makers in a profession that is both demanding and deeply important to patient care. I'm Mark Donison, and today I'm joined by Dr. Shaina Nensi, optometrist and president of the Ontario Association of Optometrists.
Dr. Nensi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thaning for having me, Mark.
It's exciting to see you back in the chair again, right?
Yes, so, I'm familiar with this environment, as members might see too.
So we're going to jump right into the questions here. And so in recognition of International Women's Day, we're focusing on women in the profession.
Okay.
From your perspective, what is important to understand about the role women play in optometry today?
You know, women really are integral in optometry today, and not just in numbers, even though that is growing, there's a larger and larger proportion of optometrists that are female, but we're also really prevalent in leadership positions, both at the association level, at policy and decision-making levels. And I think that's really important for women to understand that they really do belong and they really do have a lot of value in contributing to the profession as a whole.
And when you think about the next generation of women coming into optometry, what do you want them to feel when joining the profession?
I want them to feel that optometry is a place that they can thrive, and that there is space for them and space for their opinions. Again, not just as women, but as equal contributors to the profession.
You're the president of the OAO, the Ontario Association of Optometrists, serving on its board of directors, an optometrist, a business owner, and a partner and mother.
Yes.
How do you balance these responsibilities in a way that reflects your values?
Well, I would be lying if I said that it felt easy every day. It certainly doesn't. But when I think about balance, I think about it as something that's ever changing. It's not static in nature. And so I try and be really intentional with setting priorities for each of my responsibilities and realizing that on any given day, I might be devoting more or less time to any one of those priorities, depending on what really needs my attention. I also really heavily rely on good teams and good support systems that I have. But at the end of the day, I try and make sure that I'm leading with grace instead of focusing on perfection in the outcome.
What has leadership looked like for you at different stages of your career and life?
It's definitely been changing over the time. When I first started with the association, leadership meant, asking questions, understanding the association a little bit better and contributing where I could. It was more about learning than it was, overt public leadership. And then now, as I enter my last term as a director with the association, I've sort of changed my thinking of leadership to making things more future sustainable and more mentorship, really creating space for those leaders behind me to be able to take on their roles and responsibilities once I'm gone.
Is there an individual who has influenced your path, and how were they influential to you?
I've been fortunate to have lots of mentors and lots of examples of what good leadership looks like. When I think about what good leadership or good mentorship has meant to me, it's really been those leaders who have not tried to mold me into what they think a good leader is. They've almost put their trust in my decision making, but taught me how to lead in a way that's, aligned with my values and principles. And so I've really tried to think about that now when I mentor individuals, and the trust that was placed in me by that mentor and the way it shaped my leadership going forward.
So what does behind the scenes as the president of the association look like?
What the role of the president really is to keep in mind, the guiding principles of the association. And for us, our strategic plan is a great thing to keep in mind. And it really is about collecting a variety of different voices and opinions and making sure that any decisions that are made on behalf of the association are true to where we want to see the profession and the association going forward.
What part of your work in this role feels most meaningful to you, and why?
I think this past year has given me a solid sense of purpose of what my role is within the association, but also what the association's role is in the larger, optometry and advocacy space. And so this past year, we launched a new strategic plan, which I know you're very familiar with as well. But it really does serve as the guiding star for decision making. And so it's so nice to have that guiding star that we can always refer back to when decision making and different policy decisions become difficult, because it's really helpful to know that we're staying true to the principles of the association and the profession, even when things might feel a little overwhelming in the moment.
You're also a business owner.
Yes.
With staff working for you and all the obligations that come along with running an optometric clinic.
Yes.
So how do you apply your leadership skills in that setting?
I find that I get the best out of my employees when I truly treat them like colleagues and recognize that they are also the experts in the roles and jobs that they do. And I find when you empower your staff to take responsibility for the outcome and pull back a little bit on the path that they take to get there, it really does create a more collaborative environment that leads to better outcomes.
Is that something that you've learned over time, or was that sort of an innate perspective that you had?
I think I've learned it over time because it's helped. It's sort of been self-reinforcing, right? Like when I feel good walking into work, I will do more behaviors that emphasize that feeling or create that environment for me. And I found sometimes, when I was younger and I didn't have as much confidence in myself as a leader or as the optometrist in the situation, I exerted that dominance a little bit more, and it created a work culture that I didn't really appreciate. And when I took a moment to sort of step back and realize that as long as my team members have the same idea of what they want a patient to feel and experience when they come into the clinic, but I don't have to be as descriptive in how they get to, the tasks that they need to complete or exactly what they say to patients at any given time. As long as we all have the same idea of how we want patients to feel and how we want to respect our patients in the environment, giving them a little bit more flexibility has definitely worked better than the strategies I had as a new grad. Yeah.
This is a nice segue into the next question then. So what would you say is the most surprising part of being a leader in the profession? Mm-hmm. And really, it's something that you weren't expecting.
I don't think I was expecting to recognize how heavy some of the decision-making can feel at times. And I mentioned in my role as president, there is a lot of behind-the-scenes decision-making. And to make those decisions, you really have to think about not only what's right, but how they're going to impact the members and the profession long term. The responsibility of that decision making has actually weighed heavy on me, and I am just surprised by the extent to which I feel that sometimes.
Can you share how long you've been involved with the OAO and what your path to the presidency looked like?
Yes. So I am just trying to do some quick math in my head, but I think it's been a little over 8 years now that I've been involved with the association. So my path to presidency was not, a super straightforward one. And my path to the association wasn't even straightforward. The first year that I ran for the board of directors, I actually was not elected. And so that was an interesting experience to, have run and to have not been elected by my peers. But I spent that year volunteering on a committee with the association. And that really gave me a lot of insight into how the association functions. It was the governance committee, which is great because you spent a lot of time understanding the roles and responsibilities of directors and the purpose of an association. And then I did run again the year after that and was elected to the board. So I'm just finishing up my 7th year as a director. And it's those 7 years have been really exciting. I've had different roles, whether it's chairing committees or being the Canadian Association of Optometrists representative, and getting more exposure to how other associations work. And then, of course, I've had my few years as vice president and now my term as president. So it really has evolved over time. But it wasn't straightforward. And I think that that's the important part of being a good leader too, is persevering and, staying involved and committed even when the pathway didn't look like exactly what you had hoped.
Were you, did you have a sort of this mindset that it was like, I absolutely have to get there? Or is it more a life is a journey and I'm never sure exactly where things are going to go? But
I think when I first put my name forward, I had this idea that like, no, I need to be on the board. That's the only way that I can have the impact that I want to have on the profession. And I was much younger back then, and I was, fresh out of school. I had only graduated a year prior, and I just really felt that I needed to be at that table. And I think over time, I've recognized that there are many ways to be a leader in the association and many ways to be a leader in the greater profession. You don't necessarily have to be a director at the table. You can have an impact, being a volunteer for one of our political action committees, or just even speaking to your MPP about what optometry does. But in that moment, I did feel like the best way to be able to contribute was to be on the board. And so that second year when I ran, it was a little bit out of the perseverance of that. But now, with more wisdom and years behind me, I recognize that there are a lot of different opportunities for leadership.
Right. So what motivated you to step into the leadership role in the first place and really aim to step into the role of the president?
So to join the association, the reason I was so gung-ho when I first graduated was that our board had traditionally been made up of individuals who were much later in their career. There really wasn't very much representation. When I joined the board, there was nobody who had been practicing for less than 5 years. And I think there was one other individual who had been practicing for less than 10 years. And I really felt that if it's new grads and new entrants into optometry that were going to be, feeling the effects of this decision-making, that we should have some representation at the table. And that's why I felt very strongly about being on the board and being on the board early in my career. And taking on the role as president, I don't want to say it's something that just fell into my lap, but I think because I did have this passion for advocacy and, naturally felt like it was important for everybody to have representation at the table, it lends itself well to this type of leadership role. And so when the opportunity arose to be vice president, I was very excited to jump on that. And it's really been a fulfilling experience, and working my way through that process has been both learnings for me, but a very humbling experience at the same time.
So joining the board sort of earlier on in your career, how did you find that unfolded for you?
Within the first few hours of the first meeting, I probably recognized that there was very much a need for me to sit and listen and understand not just what the role of a director was, but how my opinion or my lived experience as a newer, younger grad actually fit into the broader context. And so I think there is a place for, that experienced person at the table for sure, but I don't want younger, newer grads to feel like there isn't a space for their level of expertise. Because even though you might not be an expert in optometry or an expert in board governance at the time, you do still have your lived experience as a new grad, and that is important in a membership association context. And so I just encourage those newer members who get involved to, yes, recognize the value you bring to the table, but also recognize the value that comes from being able to sit and listen to those who have a little bit more experience than you do. So there's a bit of balance there.
Right. So you can learn a lot, but you also bring a different perspective, right? And so it's like that the diversity of thought and experiences is also very important, right? And
Agreed.
So it's a bit of both, right?
They're both important.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. What would you say you've learned about yourself along the way?
I think I have learned how to be comfortable with some unknown, or be comfortable with a variety of possibilities in front of me, and to recognize that I don't always have to have the answer to be the right leader in that moment. And I think when I was younger, I didn't necessarily realize that you could be a leader without always being right or always knowing the end game for everything. And that's really something I've learned over time.
How do you face the instances where you recognize that you made a mistake?
My go-to is always just to be honest, to own up to your mistake, and to hope that you have a group of people around you that have enough trust in you, and that you've demonstrated your integrity enough times before that any mistake doesn't define you or define the relationships that you have. coming with solutions instead of just a problem, like, oh, I made a mistake. Thinking something was going to go one way and it went another, being able to own up to that, but then have solutions come from a solution space instead of just a sort of grievance space has been helpful.
Right. Lots of in-depth, sort of deep awareness. And
I know this
reflection,
feels a little bit not like just association type stuff, right? Like it is some deep conversation, but it's helpful to have because I don't think it's something that, I as a leader, I'm not sure if you feel this way, think about on a day-to-day basis, but I do think having these conversations and making yourself aware of how you lead will hopefully strengthen my leadership going forward.
So are there specific eye health issues or life stage changes that women should be more aware of?
Absolutely. So women's eye health can change throughout their life. So whether it's, puberty, pregnancy, menopause, there are different things that women should be aware of at each of those stages. We tend to be a little bit more prone to things like dry eye with hormone changes. And we're actually more susceptible to autoimmune diseases as well. So it is very important for women to stay on top of their eye health at every point in their life.
How does that differ from men then? So what is it that causes that type of a difference?
Mainly hormone changes. I think women, in our life cycle, have more opportunities for significant changes in hormones, particularly pregnancy and menopause being two big times in our life where our hormones do really have an effect on our general health, but also our eye health.
Okay. From your perspective as an optometrist, what do you wish more women understood about staying on top of their own eye health?
I want women to understand that eye health is dynamic. As I mentioned, it changes throughout our life and, we can become more susceptible to different things at different stages. And so I want women to know that even if they are not noticing vision issues, even if they're not experiencing dry eye in the moment, that preventative eye health care is just as important as, acute problem-based care, and to make sure that they are, prioritizing their eye health throughout their life.
And we know then, sort of building on that 90% of Ontarians consider vision to be their most cherished sense. And most say that they would be devastated if they lost their sight. Yeah. We also know that the percentage of Ontarians who have regular comprehensive eye exams is shockingly low. So what would you say are the biggest barriers for women to ensure they are best looking after their vision throughout their lives?
I think one of the challenges for women is that we sometimes wear a lot of hats and we have a bunch of different responsibilities, whether it's in our careers or in our home lives. And sometimes we can prioritize other people's health, so maybe our family's health, before we think about our own. So I really do want women to recognize that, the best way to be able to fulfill all of their roles and responsibilities is to make sure that they themselves are healthy. And vision is such an important sense, as you mentioned, that we really want to make sure that we're preserving the best vision and eye health that we can, and to not neglect that part of their healthcare. It's
a bit like the oxygen mask video there when you get on a plane, right? You have to look after yourself first.
Exactly.
Right?
It's funny. Sometimes I ask women who bring in their kids for an eye exam, like, oh, when was the last time you had your eyes checked? And they'll say, well, how old is my oldest kid? Because that was the last time that I really focused on my own health. And I think it's important to, put on your own oxygen mask, get your own eyes checked. It's just as important as the health of your family and those around you.
Do you find when you meet with patients, like women, like adults, right, that there's a sense of guilt that they encounter, or is it a time management thing, or do you see lots of different types of?
Yes, just a broad yes to that, right? I think there is, a lot of guilt, a lot of time, a lot of things that compete with our time, and I don't think that's universal just to women, but I think sometimes women feel it a little bit more acutely, and so there definitely shouldn't be any guilt associated with putting your health and your vision at the forefront as well, because, like you said, you cannot help that toddler next to you if you don't put your oxygen mask on first. And that really shouldn't come with a sense of guilt. It should come with a sense of responsibility as well to those around you.
Right. What other items would you like to discuss that we haven't gotten to yet?
One of the things I always like to talk about is unity. And when I think about the challenges that women are facing in the profession, or the profession in general is facing as a whole, and maybe not just the challenges, maybe the opportunities as well, none of them are happening in isolation. They're not just happening, to one group of optometrists or one group of women. It's really things that will affect the greater profession. And I think when we as leaders and when we as optometrists are united behind our common goal of, eye health, of advancing the profession, but really when we approach things with a united front, that is when we will see, the most solid outcomes, and when we'll be able to make sure that the profession thrives. And so I always just like to stress that unity is so important when it comes to being able to make an impact in the eye care space.
Right. And then the last question to wrap up, what's the one message you would like viewers to take away from today's conversation?
I would like viewers, and women specifically as well, to know that leadership is accessible. It's not something that is it has to be all-encompassing to your life, that you can take on small roles of leadership, in optometry. But also, if you do decide to take on larger leadership roles like I have in this space, you don't have to sacrifice your personal beliefs or even your personal time to be able to be an effective leader. There are ways to juggle the responsibilities in a way that still feels fulfilling and doesn't feel overwhelming.
Right. Dr. Nensi, thank you so much for joining us today. You're truly an inspirational leader. Thank you so much for sharing the inner workings of your mind and your heart as well. And you have lots on your plate, and you are truly highly regarded. And thank you so much, both as a leader in the profession and a mom as well. And so I know that you're very much a loving mother as well. So thank you so much for making the time to join us today and recognize International Women's Day.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Visionary Voices in Optometry. You saw that patients are in excellent hands with optometrists who are incredibly committed to providing the best possible patient care. Thank you to Dr. Nensi for sharing her personal story about what it takes to be an optometrist, a mom, a partner, and dedicated to advancing vision care through her work on the board of the Ontario Association of Optometrists. If you find this conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share the clip with your friends to stay connected for more discussions on eye health, leadership, and the future of vision care in Ontario. We'll see you soon for our next episode of Visionary Voices in Optometry.